I mean, for me, there are 5 factors that lead towards resilience. And the first is a sense of belonging. That's more important than anything else, that during the process of your development, you feel that you are accompanied by maybe the person that was your biological parent, maybe a substitute carer. But belonging means, either building on a pre-existing relationship or a new relationship slowly develops where you can trust the person and they can know you. There's nothing like having somebody in your life who really knows you, knows what you like, knows what you dislike, knows what you find difficult. And so belonging is the first thing. So belonging to that one person or 2 people. Also belonging to the community. And for children, the community is the school. So it's very important that you feel at home in school, that you feel part of the school community. So belonging would be my first, a sense of belonging to an individual person and to the school. The second factor that protects children is being able to reflect on your experiences, to think about your experiences. And we know if you don't reflect on your experiences, you act them out if they were difficult experiences, because they will have had a conscious and an unconscious impact on you. And if you're not enabled to talk about it, you will in your behaviour repeat. As I said before, when children are abused, they will repeat the behaviour that led them to be abused. So reflection is very important. And one of the roles of, first of all, people who are parents or parental substitutes, but secondly, people like teachers, youth workers, people who work with children outside the family, family friends, aunts and uncles, the role of those people is to enable children to reflect. And reflection means being helped to think about what's happened to you at your level of understanding, not at the adult's level of understanding, but at your level of understanding. So a very young child may only be able to understand, we are Kurdish people, Turkish people don't like Kurdish people, they hurt them. And as a child gets older, they may develop a more sophisticated political understanding. Or a young child might understand some ladies are not good at being mothers, some men are not good at being fathers, or your mummy is ill, or your mum gets muddled in her head sometimes because she's ill, that's why she hurt you. Or your daddy, the same. Or that man down the street that touched you in a way that in a private place, that man, he had problems, he was ill, and you're not going to see him anymore. So that kind of reflection with children that have very difficult experiences of violence, but also in normal development. Healthy children are children that are able to reflect on their experiences. And good enough parents, Winnicott's good enough parents, are those people that can talk to children at their level of understanding about things that are difficult. And I think all the problems of parenting come from parents finding it really hard to talk to children about difficult things, painful things, or workers finding it difficult to talk to children about difficult things. So I do a lot of work with teachers and with social workers and workers in children's homes. And workers who are not trained may find it really hard to talk with a child about what they feel about their mother who's in a psychiatric hospital, or their father who's left, who's disappeared, who's not going to come back in the next few years. That those kind of issues are very hard to talk about. And I think that I think parenting should be valued much, much, much more in the society, and it's not. But maybe we can fight towards that. Maybe your film will go some way towards that. So those are the first two factors, belonging and reflection. The third factor is being active. Now, any violent experience, any overwhelming experience, by definition, it makes you feel powerless, it makes you feel helpless. And anything that you can do to be active in that situation will be protective, whatever it might be. And I think that anybody working with people who've been overwhelmed, one way is a very cognitive way, not at all psychoanalytic, but quite cognitive, showing, demonstrating, thinking about together different ways to be active in difficult situations. So an example of that would be in group work at the Medical Foundation, when we're working with young people, children who've experienced violence in their country. They may also have experienced bullying in school. And bullying is, if you've already been overwhelmed, it's a very, very profound experience. If you've been in a situation where you've been present when a parent has been killed or a stranger's been killed, or you've lost your mother, it's a very common form of teasing in British schools, what's called mother cussing. So you're horrible, your mother must be a prostitute, that kind of expression. And refugee children often react extremely violently to that, in a way out of all proportion to a verbal insult. They will react with physical violence. So a lot of work we would do would be around this idea of activity, which is talking with children, adolescents, individually and in groups, about what they could have done. Because if they're violent, then they get into trouble, then they get thrown out of school. That has other consequences. And it's very interesting sitting with a group of adolescents, and everybody has different ideas. And if you talk for an hour and a half, by the end of it, you develop all sorts of ways to deal with, which are to do with being active, but not overactive, as a way of avoiding reflecting, as a way of avoiding thinking. So belonging, thinking, activity. The other two are to do with inclusion, feeling part of the community. And if you're a refugee, there's the community that you come to, and then there's your community. So that would be 4 and 5 on my list. So how can you find a way to be feel really part of the community, not to feel all the time as if you're a foreigner, as if you're a stranger, as if you're outside the main group? How can you assert yourself? How can you learn to solve problems about conflicts, about resources, about beliefs, about values, without using violence? So feeling part of the community is a way to be protected, is a way to be strong. And if you don't, it makes you vulnerable. And the last, or the first, is also about feeling connected to your culture, whatever your culture was. And for refugees, that's very important. And it's how much access do you have to your culture and to the ways that your culture coped with difficult situations. You know, how did you in Rwanda deal with difficulties? Did you talk to your mother? Did you talk to your grandmother? Did you talk to a religious leader? How were problems solved? In many African countries, people tell stories. People have group meetings. That's a way to... So that's very important, to feel part of the society. So what I'm trying to say is that there are not just psychological, internal ways that lead to resilience. There are also social ways. And we need to be psychosocial, not just psychological, not just biological. So for me, those are the 5 important factors.
They all moved into the ghetto. Slowly, everyone was evacuated or killed, and she remained alone with her daughter, and another brother of her who worked outside in the Aryan section under a hidden identity as a physician. And the mother, the daughter of that rabbi, was in the Polish underground, and she rescued children, taking them out of the ghetto and sending them to foster families outside the ghetto. And she remained with her child, 3 years old, and she had to decide what she does. And she hid her in a cellar. And she taught the child how to manage alone while she was helping other children move out of the ghetto. Now, we don't know the mother because she died from cancer after she brought her daughter to Israel in 1949. But from the stories of her daughter, we reconstruct a mother who had unbelievable capacity not only to take care of the physical needs of her daughter, but also of the emotional ones. So, for example, she made her a small doll, and she told her, "You are in charge of the 3-year-old child. You are in charge of this doll. You are her mother. You never leave her alone. You always take care of her." And that she represented something of, "And I will always come back to you." She promised her. When we interview this woman, she says, how could she promise me something that she couldn't really fulfill? But she used to really think of all kinds of things that the child could still tell us, and the unbelievable thing is the emotional memory of that child. And it's clear that her emotional memory survived because the mother went with her through all these extremely difficult stages. I will not tell you all of them. So I think there we see that if you really have a trusting relationship before the events, and then that trusting relationship accompanies you through them, it creates a completely different micro milieu which helps you survive, even if you have devastating memories and traumatic dreams and all the other symptoms that we know. But this basis you can build on later on. And you could see with this woman how she really kept her own resilience as a child thanks to that kind of relationship. And a very unusual mother. I mean, clearly that mother must have been an extremely intelligent person. She gave her, the child didn't want to eat alone, so she put a mirror in front of her and said, "You can eat in front of the mirror." And all kinds of these small things that showed how she understood that the child needs something and respected it. I think so difficult. And we know that many people are under stress can't manage that. They give up some of that. If I wouldn't have been sent by your mother, I wouldn't know where you are. So finally he convinced her to go with him. He puts her into a sack under coal, and he tells her, coal is quiet, so you don't say a word till I take you out of the ghetto. And she sits in the sack. On the way, she recalls that she forgot the doll. So she starts to bang on his back, and then she starts to shout, and he takes her into some staircase, and behind the staircase, and he takes out, "Are you crazy? You endanger me and you." He says, "But I forgot my doll." "What doll? Leave it alone." "I'm not going from here till I don't." My mother told me not to give up the doll. So she screamed, and he has no other way. He takes her back to the cellar to take out the doll. So and I can send you one interview. It's unbelievable. And also relations. She goes by boat to Israel, and her mother is already very sick, on the verge of dying from cancer. The Germans at some point caught her mother and hit her, and she lost an eye, and she got later on cancer in the eye. And she's almost dying, and she lies down in the boat. And her daughter goes, she's 12 by then, she goes out onto the deck, and she meets another boy of her age. And he asks her, what are you going down and up all the time? So she tells him, I'm looking for my mother. She's very sick and she's downstairs. So he said, there are no mothers. What do you say, mother? So he said, I am with my mother and she's there. So he doesn't believe her. So she says, come with me, I'll show you that she's there. So she takes him down, he looks, he goes, he puts a piece of paper near her nose, he's 11-year-old boy, and he says, she is still breathing, but not for a long time. An 11-year-old boy knows to put a piece of paper near the nose and to say if a person is already dying or not. And with this boy, afterwards she grows up because she goes to the kibbutz where he is, and actually he became her connection later on in Israel. But you see that this girl always knew who to go with and who not to go with. And she knew that through this kind of bonding that she had with her mother. She could trust people like her mother. She mistrusted everybody else. And she always found people like her mother to go with in the later stages.